this podcast is a tribute to my father. It really is.
I love that. Let's attribute this to both of our fathers. I love that. Mark.
Yeah. Here's to our papas.
Yeah. Welcome to the Private Chef podcast, serving the 1%. I'm your host, Hannes Henche, and on our show we speak to the best chefs, how they honed in on their skills to excel in the industry, and what it takes to work as a private chef for some of the most exclusive clients in the world. Welcome back to the Private Chef podcast. I'm your host, Hannes Henche. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of exploring the extraordinary culinary journey of Chef Marc Periano. Originally, his family is from Italy and now based in Lakewood, Ohio. From attending culinary school at the prestigious Johnson & Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island, to cooking up the freshest fish during Long Island summers, to catering hundreds of delighted guests around the US. Currently, he's working full-time for a lovely couple in Lakewood, Ohio. Marc has an ocean of culinary experience to share with us after 30 years in the industry. A warm welcome to our special guest.
Good to be here, Hans. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, 100%. So where did your love for cooking come from?
You know, my earliest memories was I was about age 11, and we moved to the suburbs. And my father looked in the backyard, and he said, well, we got a lot of land here. What do you say we make a garden? And he pointed to the woods. And he goes, you see those woods there? There's some great soil back there. We can't grow stuff in this clay. So he goes, I'll pay you 25 cents a wheelbarrow. Go get this good soil, dump it into the garden, and we'll build a garden. So I'll never forget age 11, growing beets and tomatoes and strawberries and kohlrabi, underutilized vegetable, by the way, kohlrabi. And I had my aunt and uncle come over and to do a roasted beet salad with fresh basil and goat cheese at age 11. I think I sort of already knew that I sort of have a knack for this. So my earliest thing was just gardening with my father, falling in love with food. And it was my safe haven. You know, it was just something that made me feel whole and good about myself and cooking for others at a young age. So I think those are my favorite memories growing up, was doing that. It set the tone for my career.
I think especially if you grow the food yourself, and I mean, you went beyond just growing it. Like you literally put the garden together, you got the soil in place. There's like this whole journey of creation happening right in front of you. And then all the way to like actually having like a fresh meal right out of your own garden, the own produce that you grew in that summer. It's like, there's something about that, no, that you can never forget.
Yeah, it really is very nourishing to the heart and soul and the body, you know. And to take it one step further, that simple little garden had a lot of effect on my siblings even. You know, my brother Chris one summer goes to my dad, you know, I'm bored this summer, you know, you're out of school. And my dad said to my brother Chris, he goes, Chris, you're bored? See all those tomatoes in the garden? Why don't you go sell them? So he went around with his little cart selling tomatoes. You know, like an old school Italian, he's selling tomatoes. My brother Chris went on to be in sales because of that. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Imagine how much that shaped your family's life. Your dad puts up a garden, you know, one becomes a chef, the other one becomes a salesman because you're selling tomatoes.
Isn't it amazing? And then to take it one step further, my dad says, well, we got this garden. Now we got to have a shed for all the tools, you know, the rototiller, the hoe and everything. So my dad says, we're going to build a shed. So my brother Joe helped build the shed. My brother Joe went on to be an engineer and build stuff for a living. It's crazy.
Everybody got the inspiration from the garden. Everything.
That'd make a great book, The Garden. I love it. My next book title, The Garden.
Yeah, how it shaped my family's life.
Oh, I love it.
So what happened in between you starting to grow produce at age 11 in your own garden and now becoming like a private chef for ultra high net worth individuals? It's a long journey in between. And I would like to know really what your journey was like.
The journey after that was then I really had to make a decision when I was a senior in high school, which path I'm going to go down. And I was in plays in high school, and I was in Fiddler on the Roof, and I was in these other plays, you know, Shakespeare, and I majored in speech and theater. And I'm like, I don't know. My dad, he's not going to be too keen about thinking his son's going to go to theater school. And I figured I'd have a better chance to stay employed as a chef than would be as an actor. So I decided to go to Johnson & Wales in Providence, Rhode Island, to get that journey going. And Johnson & Wales was a wonderful, wonderful experience living in Providence. And Hans, I didn't go home then after school let out, in June. I interviewed with innkeepers in New England, and it was always a dream of mine to live and be on the water and be on an. So I interviewed with innkeepers on Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Block Island. And I sat across the room with this team from Block Island, which I didn't know a lot about. And I interviewed with the head chef, Steve Verano. I interviewed with the general manager, Chris Sereno. They're all Johnson Wales grads. And I said, wait a minute, your name is Verano, you're Sereno, my name is Periano. I said, sounds like we should work together. So I spent my summers on Block Island it was a cornucopia of the freshest seafood with the lobster boats right there. The fishermen dropping off swordfish, and I'm boning out swordfish, with a spinal cord out of them like that. And it was a high volume seafood restaurant with the scallops still in the shell. And I just immersed myself into the profession. And I was a PM sous chef and did saute. 75% of the menu was saute. And I cranked out a lot of great seafood dishes. And it sort of got me really rolling as far as cooking goes, and set the tone for my career after that. And I came back home and I took a job as the chef for Progressive Insurance, believe it or not. And I was the personal chef for Peter Lewis, who owned Progressive Insurance. And I worked Monday through Friday, had my nights off, my weekends off, dream chef job. And then I had the opportunity then to have some personal chef clients on the weekends, knowing I had my nights and weekends off at Progressive. And it just carried on from there.
Yeah, it's truly like a chef's dream, no? Especially if once you get to the age of having family, you want to have the weekends off. You don't want to go too late night anymore. You just want to come home and have a life like everybody else.
Exactly. And that was the main reason for me to do that. And I wanted to coach my sons in sports. Not only, set goals to be a good chef, but I wanted to set a goal to be a good dad. So I had the opportunity then to coach my sons in sports during the weekends, and then pick and choose my clients who needed my services on the weekends, and it worked out.
Yeah, that's nice. So what do you learn working for individuals like that compared to a restaurant? What are some of the key differences that you maybe enjoy or that you find challenging?
I enjoy the human interaction more, as opposed to being in the back of the house. You're doing expo or you're working a station, but the human interaction, the human connection as a personal chef is very gratifying to me. I think that's sort of my MO, being an Italian. We have this family kind of atmosphere, and we like to be around people, and I like to be around your team, your sous chefs and everything. But let me give you a great example. A couple of days ago, I did a really nice New England, a lobster boil with Maine kind of theme. I even dressed up my clients. I had some Nautilus Island Maine shirts, and I had a lot of lobster shells left. So I said, Walter, Margaret, I'm going to make some really nice butternut squash lobster bisque for you with these shells tomorrow. And there's this man who lived in France asking me for a little bit of brandy, and I'm not paying a little bit of brandy in the middle of his bisque. And he's showing me how you take your spoon and you push the brandy towards you while you get a little bit of the lobster bisque. And I said, Walter, that is brilliant. I said, I'm going to share that with my clients, if I'm ever doing a private dinner party, and it could be anything. I could do a she crab soup, and put the sherry in there and teach them to pull the sherry with the bisque into your palate. So I love the human interaction, the stories, the people I get to meet and connect with them and learn from them about all their travels to inspire me to do other dishes. So that's the reason why I like that. The challenge is just you have to really, really be on your A game. You have to work clean. And it's not a challenge. We're all clean as you go, but you have to be really, really spotless in your work area, your space, your time management. From grocery shopping to getting home and setting up your tables. The time management is a challenge, but I enjoy it. It's not that hard for me as far as with 30 years of private chef experience, you finally reach that point. One of the challenges I find the hardest was clients that don't appreciate what you do, it can be disheartening at times. I would say 95% of my clients that I have or do have had are great people that appreciate what I do, and it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah. Do you sometimes have trouble where people don't see how much work actually goes into what you're delivering, and there's like a disconnect where that doesn't translate into appreciation because they don't actually know how much time management, sourcing of the best ingredients, running around to find those, putting them together, cleaning those, all of the above until they actually have a final meal in front of them?
I find, Hans, that is probably the toughest part about the job is the provisioning. It's going to grocery shopping and bringing everything in. You got to put it away. My first client was in Houston, Texas, my first private client. I wanted to get into the industry, and I flew out to Houston. I tried out as their personal chef, got the job, but it was for a very, very large family, and the workload was too much. And my agent, after the fact, said to me, Mark, this was probably a job that you probably could have definitely used a sous chef or an assistant.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get into the industry so bad that I was like, yes, everything. And I didn't know any better. I mean, to cook for 12 people a day with different dietary requests and needs, I was running ragged. And that to me is the most challenging part of the job. It's just the provisioning, the grocery shopping, coming back. You're exhausted before you even start cooking.
Yeah. And to what you just said, I've been there where it was a family that was very fluid in terms of guest count, and the party could go from 12 to 18 in no time. And
Right.
then when I brought that up, they were like, yeah, but we told you this is like a very flexible in that. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's humanly possible.
No, that's not humanly possible. It's not. I mean, I was watching a special last night on YouTube about this chef in a restaurant. He's a Michelin star chef in Northern California. And his team for the mise en place, I counted in this documentary probably 6 people. And they only serve 18 guests a night at this inn. You got a team of 6 for 18 guest count that night in this restaurant. And here you and I are doing it one person for 18 people. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And that's really where sometimes you feel like you left everything off the table. You went out of your way to make it happen, regardless the circumstances, how late you got certain information or a guest count. And then if the guest doesn't see like what you actually just pulled off, then you sometimes have to keep checking in with other people in the industry or maybe with your agent and be like, hey, is this normal or am I just not good enough?
Yeah, right. And when you're earlier in the career, you don't second guess your employer. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is part of the job. This is the way it should be. But then you talk to other personal chefs and you realize how it really should be. And I unfortunately moved on to greener pastures then after that, but it got my foot in the door in that industry. And I enjoyed my time in Houston nevertheless, though.
So what is something you would tell your younger self now with all the experience you have getting started in the industry?
Definitely immerse yourself in as many different, say you're going to culinary school. And one of my things I wish I would have done is at Johnson & Wales, you had your weekends off and Friday. So classes were Monday through Thursday. If you're young in this industry, immerse yourself in the industry. If they're offering additional classes on the weekends, like ice sculpturing, talk about a nice side income. If you could be a personal chef and offer ice sculptures, I recommend when you're early in your career, immerse yourself in as many classes that they offer and get very diverse. That's the best advice you can offer someone young in the industry.
Yeah, I think that, it's always a good thing to bring in diversity because no matter how good of a chef you are, there is like that natural fatigue of the same flavor profile after some time. It's just coded into DNA almost. Like there's science about that where it doesn't matter how good you cook. It's if you're not diverse enough, if you can't like change the flavor profiles, people will eventually kind of tire out of your cuisine.
Without a doubt, you're German, and I worked for a German chef early in my career. God rest his soul, he's passed on, but you'll love this name, Bruno Zuckold. Bruno Zuckold from Dresden, Germany, and everything I learned from him was German. The best sauerbraten, the best schnitzel, and dishes. And but that's all he knew. And so you've got to then reach a point where you say, you know, I'm going to need to move on in my career to learn from other types of other chefs in different types of restaurants. I think, or you can get in a pigeonhole and it's going to catch up to you. You've got to be diverse this day and age. I'm part of a consortium of chefs called Take a Chef. Are you familiar with Take a Chef out of Barcelona? And I just sent before you notice I got on the podcast right at 9 a.m., but I was sending off a menu to a client that wants a Mediterranean menu. So I got the best cookbook on Palestinian cuisine, Palestine. I'm getting a lot of requests right now for the Mediterranean type dishes.
Yeah.
And you've got to be diverse. So I'm going to learn out. I'm going to miss out on a lot of potential sales and opportunities. So you've got to, learn Spanish cuisine, learn regional Italian, learn Mediterranean, and it's going to be beneficial to you.
Yeah, there's just a lot of, I think it's been a bit of a trend. There's a lot of science around it. There's a lot of tension in different magazines and books around the Mediterranean diet and its benefits. And you and me talked about it before we went live. It's part of like a centenarian diet kind of where people actually live longer in some of those places based on their diet and other habits that they have in their daily life.
Without a doubt. Yeah, this cookbook has opened up my eyes to flavors and herbs, and it's been just a great opportunity for me to continue to learn. And people always ask me, they always ask you, where did you learn how to cook? And I tell people, Hans, I don't know about you, I tell people, I'm still learning how to cook.
Yeah, it's an ongoing endeavor.
It really is. Ongoing process.
And the thing what you said about herbs, for example, I used to work in Spain and my chef, he was so anal. We would have a herb garden, like literally outside the kitchen door. And we would pick the stuff nearly to order. Like we would have a couple dishes.
Wow.
Where certain things he wanted us to pick to order because he didn't want to lose his scent of the aroma, and obviously thyme and rosemary, you have a little bit more time to use it, but there's other like more kind of fragile
delicate
herbs.
Herbs.
Delicate is the word where you will use it. Yeah, chervil and where the flavor profile just changes within a matter of hours. And forget about having chervil in your fridge for 3 days. It will just be looking nice, but it won't have any of the fragrance left.
No, exactly. Basil as well. I put some basil in some moist towels the other day and put them in a plastic bag for a burrata caprese with peaches are in season right now here in Ohio. And you're right. I smelled the basil and it wasn't nearly as strong, so I didn't use it on that caprese salad, the basil. I have my apartment here. I got some beautiful container gardens and different herbs going on right now. And it's so beautiful to see now. Here we fast forward 2 sons. I told you about my son, Chad, my other son, Mark. He just put container gardens, and next year we're already planting this big herb garden in his backyard. And such fond memories of him picking sorrel at age 4 and eating these sorrel leaves. And I can't wait to plant his herb garden. We're very fortunate, speaking of herbs, to have the Chef's Garden here in Huron, Ohio. If you ever need a culinary getaway, Hans, you got to come back to Cleveland and we could hit the Chef's Garden. The Chef's Garden, Charlie Trotter used to use the Chef's Garden, and he's shipping his stuff out all around the country and the world right now, located right here in Huron, Ohio. They got some beautiful squash blossoms I'm doing right now for a little amuse bouche that people are loving. But you got to come up to Cleveland.
Definitely. And it's, that's also the beauty of being a private chef. Some of our clients, they have gardens and you get to pick all of that stuff like in their garden, like as you walk into the kitchen, because you just mentioned squash flowers, I just picked those the other week and I picked a couple different other flowers, and you just walk into the kitchen, you literally just picked it, and that's no matter how good supply chain is, that's like a level where you're just able to deliver a different experience.
And then when you get to the table and you describe that, you're so much more bought into it because you picked it and you harvested it. I think it's going to be reflective in the better quality of the dish, and you're going to express that to your guests really or when you go to the table. Go on.
Yeah, I was serving just a celery juice, man. And it was the proudest celery juice ever because I went out and picked the celery juice, and cleaned it and it was so organic. There was actually a bunch of bugs in the celery too. So you clean it up and you make the celery juice. I'm like, man, you would never be that proud of a celery juice unless you picked the celery yourself and grew it yourself, maybe.
Exactly. Agree with you. I was a private chef for 3 seasons. Half the year I'd go to Maine. And I worked on an island called Nautilus Island in Maine. And I had a full-time gardener. Her name was Kathy.
Yeah.
We had a full-time cutting garden for flowers. So we had 4 different properties on the island that I had to do. Not only did I have to be the chef, but I was the chef / houseman. And I had to do all the flower arrangements for the house. I had to clean fireplaces. I had to drive a boat to the mainland and go provisioning. But Kathy grew all my herbs, all my flowers, fruit trees, vegetable gardens. And then she would come back to me the next season and go, what do you want me to grow this year? So it was an evolving process. I was spoiled having my full-time gardener, Kathy, on Nautilus Island.
Yeah, I've been there. It's quite amazing. No, when you get like in spring, you're like, let's plant more of this. Let's plant less of this. Let's get more of this. Last year we had too much mint, or we had too much zucchini. Let's plant more of this. Yeah.
With gardens, having a gardener, it was nice.
Yeah. So that's a different level of luxury when you get there.
It really was. Oh my gosh! Have you ever been to Maine?
I have. 2-3 times. I went to what is it called, Acadia National Park.
Oh my gosh. I was supposed to hike there with my son Chad 2 seasons ago, and he busted his ankle, so we couldn't go hiking in Acadia.
Yeah, very beautiful place.
It really is a beautiful state, rugged, magical.
You know what blew my mind? So I fly over Maine all the time when I come from Europe, right?
Okay.
So when I first came, it always blew my mind. Just trees and trees and trees. And then I looked it up. Maine actually has like close to 90% of the land is tree covered. It's
tree and rocks.
Yeah.
And water. It's a great state. Portland was voted by Food and Wine magazine a few years back as the best city in the United States for food. And they got a bounty of different things. And they're killing it right now in food, the state of Maine.
Yeah, it's a bit of a foodie place. I mean, I guess otherwise they don't have a whole lot going on.
Right.
Beer and food. They got oysters.
And lobster.
Yeah. And I mean, even the summer season is rather short there. It gets...
Oh, my gosh.
It gets warm just for very, very bit. And then it goes right back to where the rest of the country would feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it rains in the spring. The entire spring. It's all rain there.
Yeah.
No wonder they have all those trees. They got all that water.
Yeah, right. So what were some of the things as a chef that you feel like gave you the opportunity to grow in terms of the network and the brand you build for yourself? Because you're very present online and you're active. Was that organic to you, or is that something you had to pick up and learn because you wanted to be your own rainmaker?
I think growing up, being the oldest, being the firstborn, I just felt like I always needed to prove myself. I just decided I wanted to. Food was just my nurturing point. I'll share something very personal. You probably never had a podcast where the chef shared something very, very personal. When I was a young boy, I always was fascinated with food, and I was in the neighbor's backyard checking out their garden, and I had a bully come up to me, and I was back. I'll never forget one day I was doing a special dinner and I was smelling this parsley, and it brought me back to that memory when I was a young boy picking that parsley. But the bully from the neighborhood was upset that I was back there. He took a stick and shoved it into my left eye. I lost my left eye when I was a young boy.
Oh.
And I think food at a young age just was something that was just so personal to me. And it made me feel good about myself and cooking for others. And it opened up many, many doors for me through that profession. I was very fortunate to have teachers that encouraged me. I was studying Spanish cuisine in my senior year at high school. We took the time to study Spain, and then the French teacher heard I was going to be going to culinary school, and I'll never forget. She goes, well, you should jump into my class because we're studying food right now. And you know what it's like. Everything is of French origin, a Brunoise to Dupouillet, to Sanjay. Everything you learn, it'll say get a stock pie, it's get a marmite. Everything of Johnson of Wales was everything of French origin. So I'm glad I took the time to study food from a French standpoint,
Yeah.
and it was very beneficial to me learning different nationalities. And I don't know if it even has anything to do with what we're talking about right now, but what else would you?
Yeah, just kind of, I feel like that a lot of the chefs are struggling with, making things work for themselves, and they don't necessarily have a Rolodex of clients in abundance,
Oh, I got it.
especially in the early stage.
Right.
It's kind of, how did you go about that, where you were your own rainmaker to the degree that things worked out for you without having an agency or being, just not busy enough?
You've got to be, as a private chef, you have to be your own marketing guru. And, I love the book. I don't know if you ever read the book, The Purpose Driven Life. And it talks about, it says, the first sentence in the book says, it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about serving others. And that's what you and I do. We serve others. So I'm active in a couple different organizations where they have large events. Like I'm active here in Cleveland, Cornerstone of Hope. Great organization. People have lost a loved one suddenly through suicide, death, murder, overdose, whatever. And they have a big gala every year. So I donate my services. And we get asked all the time to participate in these private events. You have to get involved. We have another great organization here from a private client that I cooked for many years ago. I used to be the coach of the Cleveland Browns. And he has an organization, nonprofit called Coach Sam Scholars. He goes out into the Cleveland schools. They have teachers and kids who are struggling academically. They offer tutoring. And so they have a couple of big events every year. And I volunteer my services, my time. I donate dinner parties all the time.
Yeah.
We get asked, we're like rock stars. We get asked to be at these people's homes. So I put myself out there.
Yeah.
And that's how I get a lot of my Rolodex, as we're saying, of clients going. I donated a gnocchi rolling class for a client for Cornerstone of Hope. So I got this Italian family I'm cooking for, and it opened up other doors to other clients. So you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to put the time in and market yourself in ways that you can't do just on a business card. Get yourself out there, and that's the key. It's opened up a lot of doors for me.
Yeah, that's right. Like handing out business cards. And actually, it's funny that you say it. So one of my friends who came from Europe, he came to New York and he was already a pretty decent chef. And he just literally ran around the Upper East Side handing out business cards. And then after a couple of months, he was like, I don't know, nobody's hiring me. And I'm like, yeah, because it doesn't make you look very premium if you hand out business cards like literally in front of the people's houses. And when you come in through the angle that you just mentioned, where you're already part of a prestigious organization or an event, it just puts you on a different level. And then hey, this chef, has come through this organization towards ours, and we've maybe even donated money, and that's how we got his services. And he's donated his time, so everybody donated something for a good cause. That's how we connected. It puts you on a different level in the relationship.
You nailed it. That's exactly it. And the clientele, I find that go to these events are at a different level, and money's really no option to them. And it's worked out for me for many, many years. It can be exhausting at times, but I enjoy doing it. I believe in these couple of causes, so it does come from the heart. And people pick up on that if it doesn't come from the heart or not. So,
yeah.
But I'm busy. I'm doing good just by networking and getting involved. Do you ever get asked to go on television and cook, Hans?
I've been before, but it's nothing. I'm not too fond of it. I don't like the way American TV frames it.
Interesting.
See, I'm not too crazy about competitive chef shows for sure. And I don't know, there's something about it where I wasn't too crazy. And maybe part of that is because the first chef I worked for in Germany, he was very big into TV. And I always saw him just being completely burned out. So maybe I'm already I don't want to evolve into whatever he was,
Oh, I see what you're saying. And what I'm referring to, and I'm the same way, I was asked to, try out for the Food Network for a special episode of Yacht Chefs.
Yeah.
And what I'm referring to is the television on the local standpoint, local stations,
Yeah.
PBS, was having a big telethon to raise money for PBS. So I cooked on there, or we have local television
Yep.
stations. I enjoyed sharing what my knowledge on there. And that's the aspect that I like. I don't that approach either as far as national shows and being competitive that way.
There's also different aspects. So one is, I feel like the few things that I've participated in with media is things get taken out of context real quick, and they will frame you in whichever way they want to make their show work.
Oh, good point.
And that's one of the things I didn't enjoy with different media outlets that I engaged with before. Frankly, this is one of the reasons I'm producing right now, so I'm not taking,
good for you.
And I'm not taking anything out of context. I'm creating something that I appreciate. And I want everybody who comes, for example, on this podcast to be comfortable with before something goes out. And I felt like there were a couple of instances where I was in work with the media and where they completely took things out of context. And I didn't appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate your time, energy, and I think this is a great platform for chefs. I just saw this great read. It's a James Beard cookbook. It's on stories, and they delve into stories of different chefs around the world and bizarre things that they're harvesting or cooking, and getting deep down and sharing chefs' confidential, things that goes on behind the scenes. And I think this is a great platform.
You remember when Kitchen Confidential came out?
I sure do.
Yeah. So when that book came out, and then the German translation eventually came out, I gave it to my mom and I was like, here, this is pretty close to what my life looks like.
Right.
And she was like, oh my God. Like the first couple of years of my career, they were like probably really concerned about my overall health, physically and mentally.
I like what you're saying. And it's easy. It's easy to get caught up in that and get burnt out. And I've taken a step back, and you and I have been talking about health lately. And it was getting to a point, let's toast the chef. Cheers to the chef. And they want you to participate. Last year I did a party for the Cleveland Ballet in their home, and the vodka was flowing. They're Ukrainian, and it's tradition. They got the caviar, the vodka flowing, and it's easy to get caught up in that lifestyle. Yeah. And I've reached a point now, I just tell my clients, no, I'm sorry, I don't drink here at work. I'm not drinking. And talk about taking your career to a whole new step. You want to stay healthy. It's easy for us to get caught up in that whole lifestyle. And I've realized that it's not working for me anymore.
Yeah, I think, if I would have stuck to the way I did this when I started, there's no way I could perform the next day on the level that I'm trying to deliver. I don't think I could do it anymore.
I find my mise en place is that much better. My energy is better. I'm more organized. Talk about everything in place. Ever since that I've stopped drinking, I have much more energy. I'm more in tune. Yeah. And it's been just, you get older, you can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And the funny thing is, originally when you're young, I went into the kitchen when I was 17. You feel like invincible. Like you barely need sleep, you party and then you still go. Yeah. And then I remember my sous chefs and stuff who were in the mid 30s, 40ish. It was impossible for them to go out one night a week with us. And they would still feel dead 3 days later. And then, eventually you get to that point yourself where okay, energy just shifted. It's not the same anymore. You can't just crush it for 100 hours and go party.
I totally agree with you. And the stress level, if you've been drinking the night before, the stress level the next day is going to overtake you, and you're going to freak out. It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, 100%.
You've seen the movie Chef where he just loses it.
Yeah.
And what was it stem from? It was stem from alcohol and drug abuse.
Yeah. It certainly messes up your system in so many ways. I think there's no more doubt about it. The nervous system just doesn't. There's so much to be said about health around the chef lifestyle that is just not good.
Yeah. So you said you don't drink coffee anymore. You drinking some mushroom, some dried mushroom blends?
No. So I really, majority of what I drink is just water, and I don't drink sodas. I don't drink coffee anymore. I don't drink, and started appreciating the nuance of feeling better and being more energized.
Oh, that's great, Hans. Knock on stainless steel.
Yeah, it was like a natural journey where I just learned how to just tune in a little bit and be like, okay, how do I feel when I consume this? And how do I feel when I consume this? And I think if people would, like, for example, when my morning routine is I want to have some motion in daylight. I take not like an ice cold shower, but I take a cold shower depending on whatever comes out of the pipe. In the winter, it's colder. In the summer, it's just coldish. And I just try to wake up my system with natural instances instead of just pouring 2 cups of water.
Wow, that's deep. I love that.
2 cups of coffee. I mean, I'll have a lot of water. I pour water over my skin. I watch sunlight and I get into motion. And I think I feel very calmly, but very awake. While before, maybe I would just get up, maybe I have a coffee or something, and then I would feel
nervous.
I would feel nervous awake. And maybe people
nervous and yeah.
And maybe people mistake that for being awake. They're like, oh, now I'm ready to go. But if somebody really calm looks at you and you're like, okay, you just had 3 espresso for breakfast, you might feel like you're more awake than half an hour ago, but you're not like calm.
You're not calm. You're going to be like the Tasmanian devil. Remember that little cartoon character running around? You're going to be that little Chef Tasmanian devil in the kitchen if you're on 3 espressos. And you're not calm.
The way I observed that was one of the people I used to work with in the kitchen. He was a manager. The guy would probably have a quart container of coffee by noon and 2 Cuban cigars. And you could literally see the shift in his personality, in everything. Like by the time we were ready for lunch service, forget about dinner, he was a different individual. And I was like, oh my God, these chemicals, it sounds so basic. Like we're just talking about coffee and now somebody will be like, oh, you're very extreme. Like just observe yourself and observe what other people are doing with themselves. You're acting different 3-4 cups later. It's just a fact.
I appreciate that, Hans. You just inspired me in the morning. I'm going to try that. The cool water, the sunlight, and I'm gonna remember that.
I mean, we spoke about health and longevity before we got on, but I think I also got inspired by my clients who wanted a better life for themselves. You know, once they got the money, once they got rich, and then they're like, okay, how do I get the most out of life? It's by actually feeling great every single day. How do you do that? By okay, you eat and drink what makes you feel great and alive. Not necessarily Coca-Cola, French fries, and all the other stuff.
No, the client that I had in Maine, they live half the year in New Orleans, and then they go to Maine and they have this private hour. The first thing they would do in the morning, have a nice breakfast, some fresh squeezed juice I would do, and then they would play tennis in the morning. And that got them going. Yeah. We had a tennis court. So then in between lunch and dinner, then I started doing that and I started feeling better about myself. I find us as chefs, we put ourselves out there. Did you ever notice early in your career, I think you've reached a balance in your life, but I found myself early in my career, it was about taking care of everyone else but myself. Yeah. And I started playing tennis with our boat captain, Tommy, in between lunch and dinner. And it was beneficial to me. And I had more energy. I wasn't tired. I had more energy by doing athletic things. And it was great. That's the thing you have to realize, like what adds energy to your life. And it can be different. Right. Different changes in what you do athletically. It can be different changes in how you go about your sleep routine. It can be what you eat, when you eat. When you eat is a big one. Like if you have a heavy meal right before bed, your sleep is not restorative. So you will sleep, but it will not be rejuvenating your system, and you will not feel like jumping out of bed. You will just like, your body will put so much energy into digestion of whatever you just ate, and it will completely change the quality of your sleep. It will change the quality of your morning. That's very true. I probably don't eat after 8 o'clock. Yeah. The only thing. What time do you find you stop? Nothing. So it depends. If I'm working for clients, sometimes I'm guilty that obviously if I send out the main course, I might like binge on it, because if I didn't have the time to make a proper meal for myself before I get going for their main, then I kind of eat maybe after I served something when I get a window there. But generally, I try to eat like 3 hours before I go to bed. That's right. That's about where I'm at. And it's nice because it seems to be, they always say to eat in smaller portions, and us prepping a meal for a client, there seems to be just a little bit left that you have there. You always want to have that extra 10%, whatever. So I find myself that I'm eating smaller portions. People say, how do you keep your weight down? I go, because I'm eating smaller portions. It's all about, managing that. Yeah. And I mean, portion size in the United States. And sometimes I'm guilty of that because I got so accustomed to massive portions that some
sometimes I bring it out
Right.
to the clients and they're like, Hannes, this is just too much. Give us less food. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like, because sometimes you have a client who wants like the table to be like a royal feast. And then you have like, no, I just want
Right.
to have enough food. Like,
Yeah, and now I've had to curtail them because I got this client, they're in their 80s and they're like, that's too much food. You're right. So I've had to cut back on the portion size, the salads. They don't want desserts every day. Whereas other client, they're younger, they want desserts every day.
yeah.
But I've limited now to every other day for them. And I think that's why my client, Margaret, she looks like she's 27 because it's all about portion control.
Yeah, it's all in there. It's in the portion control. It's in skipping the sugar. It makes a huge difference. But the thing is, you have to allow yourself to feel the difference in your own system. And for me, it was, I came from one extreme and my body told me, you cannot do this more longer. I found myself in the hospital because I was going too hard between everything I was doing, from work to stress to how I was eating. And I would have like a pizza at 1 a.m. with a bunch of beers, would go to bed, go back to work. And I was not well, man. And then I was like, okay, there's a different way to go about this. And there's actually a very natural way to go about it. All we have to do is kind of listen, like, hey, what does this one want? And there's a guy who takes it to a very different extreme, Brian Johnson. You might have heard of him. So the last 2 years, he's come up with like, I think it's called Blueprint. And he's trying to reverse his aging. He has a team of
Wow.
doctors. He has 25 doctors. He spends around $2 to $3 million a year on his health. Obviously, that's not for us, but there's part of his work that translates. And he's like, hey, my brain is actually not the best to make decisions, or my mind is not the best to make decisions about what I want to eat or should eat. And definitely at night, after I had a day full of stress and everything, my brain just wants to like satisfy it, and you start eating junk and all kinds of stuff. And
Guilty.
he was, yeah, I'm guilty of that too. If especially you can feel it when you're stressed, and I see it with my clients too. When they go through mental stress, they start eating all kinds of crap. So
Yeah.
what he started doing is he really dialed in it from a scientific perspective, and he's measuring so many biomarkers in his body. And he's like, okay, my body only gets this to eat. No more excuses. It sounds a bit extreme, but I'm inspired by how he approaches it. He's like, my late night mind doesn't get to decide anymore. It's just a hard no, and we're like data driven. We'll do whatever makes us feel best possible way, also based on the biohackers, not just on how he feels. And he's like, actually, when you see his skin and when you see how he looks, you can tell the guy literally shaved off years of abuse of his body within like 2 years of being very extreme. Obviously, that's the other end of the pendulum. Most people don't want to live there. And I think chefs are on the extreme end on the other pendulum if they don't start paying attention. And I think I would like to inspire people to come somewhere in the middle. They don't need to be Brian Johnson, but they also shouldn't act like chefs in their worst years, because the life expectancy of chefs is very short.
Agreed. 200% on that. And to further inspire you, I noticed a change in my health, and I was diagnosed with a hiatal hernia. And what it is, it's a hernia in your stomach, and it protrudes up to your esophagus and diaphragm.
Yeah.
And I was recommended surgery at the Cleveland Clinic, but then I looked at other outlets that I can go. And I changed my diet, and I don't have the discomfort from this hiatal hernia. I got rid of fried foods out of my diet. No more fried chicken, which I used to love.
Yeah.
As a chef, you crave stuff that you don't cook with. It's about that pizza you were talking about. I cut out the spicy food. I've cut out the fried food. I cut out the sugar. The alcohol was a big one. And I'm able now to control this hiatal, and I don't have to have the surgery because I was able to reverse through diet. So it's been great.
This is so amazing. And there's so many conditions we have, I think, especially in America, because in America, we're not suffering the lack of things. We're suffering the abundance, the abundance of calories, the abundance of sugar. And there's so many conditions that people carry to the hospital, and surgery just sounds like the quickest way out for them. It's like so much easier to, get your fat removed from your body than actually living healthy.
Yeah. There was, I love how you said after about 2 years, you started looking different. I was inspired by a story of this guy, Daniel. To me, Daniel was the first nutritionist. And if you go back into the Old Testament, this guy Daniel was the personal assistant chef to this king Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
He was gluttonous, overweight, out of control. So we finally got up the nerve one day, this Daniel, to go to the king, goes, time out here. King, if I'm going to be your personal assistant, obviously, I think he was thinking the fact that, well, he just wants this king to die. He's not going to be employed by this guy anymore. So he's going to do everything he could to get this guy healthy again, this King Nebuchadnezzar. So he recommended a diet rich in vegetables and fruits. And it was an amazing story. And they said he started feeding him all these vegetables. And they said after, like 10 weeks, he looked 10 years younger. It's a great story.
And it's possible. I wait for it. I shifted my dad's diet after a heavy meat diet, and my dad wasn't doing good on any of his biomarkers, and the blood tests came in really bad. And I was like,
the cholesterol had to be off the chart.
And I was like, just give me a couple of weeks and we can turn this around. Within less than 8 weeks, the doctors took him off his blood pressure medication. And, we were doing, It's not rocket science. You're having straight up celery juice once a day. You're eating your vegetables over your, there's no more fried food or little fried food. Occasionally you wanted some fries and stuff, but and you can manage this really, really quickly.
I agree.
It speaks to the beauty of the body, it can rejuvenate. It's not a static, and it's not once it's degraded that it's down there. It's like you can actually, to a very old age, you can recover from many different things.
The liver recovers, everything. Your body's an amazing piece of work.
Yeah.
How's your dad doing now?
Let's not talk about it, please.
Got it.
Yeah, we can talk about it after this.
Another story. We'll talk about that in personal then.
Yeah. I
lost my dad. I miss him dearly. He was the one that said, let's go check out this Johnson & Wales college. And, I have such fond memories of, we talked earlier about getting in the garden with him. And I miss that cranky old Italian. And so this podcast is a tribute to my father. It really is.
I love that. Let's attribute this to both of our fathers. I love that, Mark. Yeah.
Here's to our papas.
Yeah.
Speaking of Papa, I just became a grandfather, and that's another reason why I want to start living a healthier life. I want to be around for my grandson Roman a long time. Roman Periano. How Italian is that, Hans?
I love that. You definitely have to read the book that you already mentioned your family has. Read this.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to get on it.
He speaks about the kind of everything you want to do when you're old. And part of that is like just simple things like being able to play with your kids, sitting on the ground and actually being able to get up from there, lifting the kids up when they're like 30 pounds and you just without support, just lift them up. Those are all tasks you want to be able to do to have that quality time with them.
Without a doubt. I can't wait to get on that, start reading that. I've been so busy with different projects. I'm working on a really good cookbook right now, Ocean to Table.
Nice.
When I was out to sea, I would get all these fishermen, thousands and thousands of dollars of fishing equipment, and they know how to catch fish, but they don't know how to cook it.
Yeah.
So I've been working on this second edition, this book, Ocean to Table, how to sear tuna properly, how to make some really great ceviches. It's been a fun project. And then my sons gave me 2 books that I'm doing a lot of writing in. One is called I Want to Know Everything About You, Dad. And it's got 200 pages of stuff you got to write about your history in your life. And I've been working on that. I vowed I'd get that done. And then my sons and daughter-in-law got me for Father's Day, My Dad, the Rock Star Chef. And it's all your own recipes. And I'm so bummed out that I don't have a lot of my grandma's recipes. So I'm in the process of writing all these recipes in this one book that you can order online. So I've been working on that, getting that filled out.
My aunt gave me a whole book with my grandma's recipes.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, but I can't find it anymore.
See, isn't that driving you? Aren't you like really bummed out about that?
It's been killing me for years. Every year when I go back to Germany, I still have my parents just kept my room. Every year I'm hoping to find it.
Oh.
I don't remember. I have no recollection where I put it when they gave it to me. And it had like so many of the recipes of my grandma.
Oh my gosh. And when you least expect it, it's going to show up.
Yeah, hopefully.
It really will. You better text me as soon as you find that.
Yeah, I will. And by the way, fill out that book, the grandpa book. I gave that similar book to my grandpa. He never filled out a word. And then It's so funny. Yeah. Just fill it out. It will mean a lot to them.
Just I'm filling out. So I
Yeah.
make a point. I get out of my comfort zone. I'll get out of my apartment and I'll go to a restaurant, whatever, with a cushy couch, and I get in the right frame of mind, and I sit there and I'm writing out all the recipes. It's a great read. I wish I had it here. I kept it in my car because when I go somewhere, that I see it right next to me, it's staring me in the face.
It's like, you got it
And
right.
so, yeah. Like, give me an example real quick of one recipe you wish you had at your grandma's right now that you don't know how to do, that you wish that you had the recipe for.
She used to make all of these like different German dishes that,
Yeah.
I mean, some of them I know how to make them, but I don't know how to make them like her. And
Right.
and I give you one very simple one. She used to make these just waffles, German waffles.
Ooh.
And nobody in our family knows how to make waffles like her. I don't know what the heck she was doing. We still, my sister even still has the same waffle maker. So it's somewhere in the dough is something that we don't know how to make it like my grandma.
Well, I have that client, Walter and Margaret. I'm going to ask Margaret when I go to work today. Maybe she has that German recipe for those waffles. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, maybe. And it's something that I wasn't aware of when I was younger, is that knowledge just dies if you don't expect it. If you don't carry it forward, it just dies.
It dies. You took the word out of my mouth. I was just going to say it dies. And that's why I love the beauty of my children and my daughter-in-law. They know the value of those recipes. And I can pass that legacy on. It's not a lot, but for them knowing that I'm so afraid to die. You know what I mean? I don't want to die because there's so much I want to do. There's so many places I want to be, so many people I want to cook for. The thing that keeps me going is the fact that I know if I finish this book, that legacy will be passed on to my children, my grandchildren, and that's what fuels me to keep this recipe book going.
And the beauty is now we're in an age where so many recipes are online, so we're being kind of diluted out of maybe the good old work, because now we have all of that stuff that comes from blogs and influencers, and they put up a random recipe and you find 50 that are similarly random, but then you're like, where are the crates? And like some of that is like part of from our grandparents or from the chefs we used to work with. Like I remember not too long ago, I used to handwrite every single recipe in my little recipe book, and I would travel with the recipe book wherever I go. Like I couldn't just Google recipes. But now,
right? We didn't have that. I'm an old guy. I'm an old guy compared to you. We didn't have that when I was younger.
So everything was written down, and I still have like folders and handwritten books, and like I still have a lot of the menus. So the menu from the previous day that we wouldn't use anymore, we would use it to write down stuff on the next day. So I have like this whole binder of old, not only menus, but also the stuff that I wrote on it, both sides. And that stuff is all not in the web. So unless you and me put an effort to kind of putting it to data and maybe digitalizing it, it will surely get lost.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that you find yours. And there's nothing better than looking at a recipe from your family with seeing a little bit of flour on it or a little bit of grease, whatever, that's slightly stained versus a recipe from Pinterest. What are you going to be more into cooking? Is that family recipe or something you found on Pinterest? You're going to go with that family recipe every time.
You know, also what struck me, you mentioned the portion control, portion size earlier. Most of the recipes that are from previous generations, they serve a lot less food per portion.
That's true. Very true. Yeah. The recipe that it cringes me, I wish I would have asked my grandma at the time. She used to make this coconut cake with this French meringue sort of marshmallow frosting. And it was to die for, this coconut cake. And I'd give anything to have that recipe and put that in my cookbook that my sons want, and then make that coconut cake for my children that are next to, and then they'll have that recipe. So I'm looking for a good coconut cake recipe if you have one, Hans.
Yeah, I'll check.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Well, Marc, this has been very, very widespread, actually. You know, it's been a very intriguing conversation. Thank you so much for making the time, being so open, sharing so much about your family too.
I appreciate it very much, Hans. I enjoyed it and appreciate your time and effort. Anything I can ever do for you, please let me know. Don't hesitate. And you have an open invite to come to Cleveland, Ohio. We got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We got great restaurants. You'll love our West Side Market. Our West Side Market is in a complete renovation. It's been around since 1925. It rivals the Seattle market. So
Nice.
I'm insisting you come into Cleveland. We're going to take good care of you.
We'll
Okay?
make it happen. We'll make it happen.
All right, my friend. Take care.
Thank you for joining us at the Private Chef podcast. If you know any highly skilled chefs that want to take their life to the next level, make sure to share this podcast with them. And if you enjoyed this episode, click subscribe and check out our upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.